Hello and welcome. My name is Natty Cash, and we are back with Champions League football predictions. We're now into the second match day. As you can see, I put the results of what I did last time out. I have guessed about half of the results correctly. And then the one exact score, as you can see, is Juve PSV. I did get that one exactly on the dot. So let's see if I can maybe improve on that, get a few more exact scores, perhaps then get in the double digits for correct predictions here. So the first game that's happening is the Red Bull Salzburg up against Stade Brestois. And so when I look at these two teams, Red Bull Salzburg has kind of been struggling, and their loss against Sparta Prague was tough. If I was looking for Salzburg to get into the playoffs, they'd be wanting to get points from a game like that. But losing 3-0 is pretty tough. For Brestois, they're having a tough time in Ligue 1. They did get a win against Sturm Graz, which would be one where you want to get a win if they want any chance of getting to the Champions League playoffs. And so both of these teams are struggling a little bit. Even Salzburg, normally towards the top of their league, they're sitting in third. They're going to have a tough game on the weekend against Sturm Graz to see if they can push their way up. But both of these teams are not at their best at the moment. And I think that's going to maybe be indicative of what the score is going to be. There might be some back and forth and some action here and there. But at the end, I think this is really going to be a dead draw, which doesn't really benefit either of them, as they're going to be looking to try to get 3 points out of this game. I think Brestois looked good at home, but I think they're going to struggle away, although I am going to still call this a draw. So I'm going to have Salzburg and Stade Brestois having a 1-1 draw. Next up, we have Stuttgart hosting Sparta Prague. And Stuttgart played fairly well against Real Madrid in the last week, and then have done decently well. They got a big win against Dortmund, and then they did draw against Wolfsburg, although going down to 10 men. So Stuttgart is looking good. Despite them sitting in 8th in the Bundesliga right now, they look pretty strong. Sparta Prague also did fairly well, beating RB Salzburg in their first matchup. And even though they're second in the Czech league right now, they do have a big game against Slavia Prague coming up on the weekend. And so this one here, I think, I do give the edge to Stuttgart here, and especially with how well they've been playing. Like, they played well against Real Madrid, even though losing 3-1. Really, that last goal is not really indicative of the game. Like 2-1 or even closer to a draw could have been possible in that game. And so I am going to give the edge to Stuttgart. It just depends on how big of a win is it going to be. I think Sparta Prague is going to come out well, but I think they did benefit from the fact of being at home against Salzburg in their first matchup. So I'm going to give this maybe a 3-1 victory for Stuttgart. I think they're going to be able to handle business fairly well in this matchup. Next up, we have Borussia Dortmund hosting Celtic. And when you look at these two teams, like Celtic have always done well in their Scottish league, the Scottish Premier League. Right now, they haven't dropped any points, have won 6 out of 6 games. And then they also did well by beating Slovan Bratislava at home. The problem is can Celtic take that form away and be able to get results? And going to Dortmund is going to be tough. Dortmund are sitting in 5th in the Bundesliga, and even though they lost big against Stuttgart in the league, they did well against Club Brugge in their first matchup, and that was away from home. That was in Belgium. And so I think at home, Dortmund should have the advantage here. Again, it depends on by how much. And it'll be interesting to see where Celtic sits in this, because they're probably used to having a lot more of the possession, where then playing more defensively is going to be potentially tough for them. I'm going to give Dortmund a 4-1 victory here. Again, nothing against Celtic. I hope that they can take that form into some of their other home games, and I think they're going to be tough to beat at home. But I think away they're going to have a tough time, especially against a high-quality team like Dortmund. So 4-1 victory for Borussia Dortmund. The next matchup is Barcelona hosting Young Boys. And this one, I think it's going to be a pretty easy call here. Barcelona has done very well in La Liga so far. Although they lost to Monaco, a big part of that was getting the red card. And they've only lost this one game recently against Osasuna in La Liga. Otherwise, they were a perfect 7-0 in the La Liga so far. Young Boys are kind of the opposite of that. Losing tough 3-0 in their first matchup against, Aston Villa. And then they're also really doing very poorly in the Swiss League as well, sitting in 11th spot out of 12 teams. So Young Boys are having it tough, and I don't think it gets any easier here. Barcelona needs to get these 3 points to kind of get their Champions League momentum going, and I think they will. It could be a tough matchup for Young Boys. I don't see them having success here, and this could be a blowout. I'm going to give it maybe like a 5-0 victory. Young Boys have some stuff to figure out. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough Champions League campaign for them. Might be a tough campaign for them all around. So Barcelona are going to win big, 5-0. Next up, we have Inter Milan versus Red Star Belgrade. And again, another scenario where it feels like it's going to be a lopsided victory here. Although when we look at the league pattern, maybe is a little bit different than the previous game where we have Inter Milan sitting in 4th right now in Serie A. They had a decent win against Inter, but decent win against Udinese, but did lose to AC Milan at home. And so it's they're having some lost points so far, but I think being at home against Red Star is not going to be too difficult for them. Red Star are doing well as always in their own league, but I think it makes a difference when you get into the Champions League. They did lose at home to Benfica, close 2-1 game, but I think now going away from home and into Inter Milan is going to be very difficult. I do see Inter Milan running away from this, and I'm going to give probably like a similar score, something like 4-0. I don't see this being a very close matchup either. And again, it could be more than that. So Inter Milan with a convincing win. Next up, we've got a tough matchup here. We've got Bayer Leverkusen hosting AC Milan. And Leverkusen is doing well in their own league, sitting in 4th in the Bundesliga so far. They had a good draw against Bayern over the weekend. And they did well in their first matchup, winning 4-0 against Feyenoord going away from home. And so now with their first home matchup, they could really do some damage here. AC Milan have also had a good start to their year as well. They did lose against a tough Liverpool team, but have beat Inter Milan and are currently sitting in 3rd in Serie A. And so both of these teams, I think, are going to be towards the top of or at least in the top half of the Champions League standings. And so this could be one that really might be a difference between, is one team going to make it into the automatic qualifying or, really determine some rankings within the Champions League table. I am going to give the slight edge to the home team here, but it's going to be a close one, maybe a 2-1 victory for Leverkusen in the end. Next, we have one of the bigger matchups of the weekend, Arsenal hosting Paris Saint-Germain. This is going to be a tough one, back and forth. When we look at Arsenal, they're currently sitting, I think, 3rd in the Premier League, doing decently well. They had a tough stretch of games when they were playing Aston Villa, Brighton, Tottenham, then drew against Atalanta, drew against Man City. That was a tough tough set of games, and I think they did decently well to work their way through that. Now they've kind of had a couple easier games that they've worked through, and now are prepped for this PSG game. PSG, on the other hand, they're doing well in their league, of course, but when they played against Girona in the Champions League, they barely squeaked by a 1-0 victory there. Girona was pretty good defensively, and it was just kind of a mishap from the goalkeeper that allowed PSG to get the victory there. And so I see Arsenal as being a better team than Girona, and especially with PSG going away from home, I do see Arsenal winning this. I still think it's going to be a tight game, and I think Arsenal are going to be able to shut things down defensively. And so I'm going to only put it as a 1-0 victory here, but I do see Arsenal getting the 3 points in this matchup. Our next matchup, I think, is a really intriguing matchup where PSV Eindhoven are hosting Sporting Clube de Portugal. I think it's really... So when you look at both of these teams are exactly 7-0 in their leagues. They have not dropped any points thus far. So they're both top of their leagues. And then PSV Eindhoven looked really decent against Juve, even though they lost 3-1. And Sporting did well to beat Lille 2-0 at home. And so this one's really an interesting battle between maybe who's the better out of these top teams in their leagues. Might be a good comparison of, which league is a little bit better. I do see this game as being a really interesting one to see who could maybe move their way up the standings a little bit more. When I look at these two teams, and it's really tough, I'm going to go with the team that I think might have the best offensive threat. And I really like the play of Gyökeres for Sporting. It's going to be a close one. And really, like, this is one I could see that could go any direction. But I'm going to give Sporting a 2-1 victory here against Eindhoven. And this is going to be one, I think, if you're not looking at watching games of the top teams, this would be one I think would be really intriguing to watch. So I am giving Sporting the edge, though, a 2-1 victory. And this next game is going to be Slovan Bratislava hosting their first Champions League game up against Manchester City. And this one I think is going to be ugly. I hope that Slovan Bratislava is going to do well, have a good showing. I do see them struggling throughout this Champions League league phase, but I really hope that they can show something decent to their fans. They're doing well in their league, but Man City is probably the toughest matchup that they could ever get here. Man City, even though sitting in second and dropping points against Newcastle recently, they're going to see this as an opportunity to get things right. I think with the league phase format, I think goal difference is going to be important, and they're going to take that opportunity. I think this is going to be similar to how Bayern beat Zagreb 9-2. I think it's going to be a similar type score. I'm going to give it an 8-1 victory for Man City, and I'm giving Bratislava that goal there. Hopefully that the home fans have something to cheer for in that game, because it is not going to be great. Man City are going to be hosting or keeping most of the possession throughout that entire game. So I'm going to give that win to Man City. Our next matchup is Shakhtar Donetsk hosting Atalanta. This one, again, is interesting to see because both teams are, I would say, maybe below expectations in their league. Atalanta currently sitting in 12th in Serie A after losing to Como and then drawing against Bologna, even though Bologna went down to 10 men. Shakhtar also isn't doing great. They're sitting in 4th in the Ukrainian league. Atalanta did well at home against Arsenal, getting a 0-0 draw and really getting a lot of good opportunities. Shakhtar, on the other hand, when we look at their matchup against Bologna, had some opportunities, just couldn't capitalize away from home, and again got a draw there. So I was hoping that Shakhtar could maybe get more out of that game, and that would give them a good chance of getting into the Champions League playoffs. But I think a lot of their other games are going to be tough for them. Where they can get their points is going to be at home, which I would then give maybe a slight advantage here. However, when I look at Atalanta, I do think the quality is a little bit better there, and I think Atalanta are going to have enough here. I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory. I think Atalanta defensively did very well against Arsenal, and I think could continue that against a team like Shakhtar. So 2-0 victory for Atalanta. Our next matchup is Girona hosting Feyenoord. And this will be an interesting one. I think this is then Girona's first home game in the Champions League. So I think their fans are going to be really up for it. And there's going to be a lot of momentum for them because they haven't really experienced that momentum in the league. Their last 3 league games have been 2 draws and a loss. And they could really use something like this in a win. They did almost get a result from their PSG game. It was just an unfortunate slip of the hands of the goalkeeper to let PSG get the 1-0 victory there. But Girona, I think, looked decently well there, although they had to play fairly defensively to try to stop the onslaught of attack from PSG. Feyenoord also are struggling in their league, sitting in about 6th right now. And they did not look up to the task when they are hosting Bayer Leverkusen. And so I'm concerned. And as I predicted, I think Feyenoord are going to struggle within the Champions League this year. This is a game where then, it's tough to tell whether who's going to win here. I am going to give the slight edge, I think, to Girona. And so I'm going to give maybe just a 1... Actually, no, I'm going to make a little more goals here. A 2-1 victory for Girona. I think the fans are going to be behind them. They're going to be pretty hyped to be hosting a Champions League game for the first time ever, and they're going to get the 3 points on the board over Feyenoord. Next, we have Liverpool hosting Bologna in a matchup where Liverpool are looking fairly strong. They're sitting right now top of the Premier League. Since their loss against Forest, they haven't dropped any points. They got a good win against Milan, or AC Milan recently, or in their first matchup. So I think they look pretty strong. Bologna, I think if you're trying to look at games where they could have gotten points and had a chance to push their way into the playoffs, it would have been against Shakhtar Donetsk. But going 0-0 against them, I think, means that it's going to be tough for Bologna to be able to find results anywhere else. Bologna have been struggling in Serie A, only sitting in 13th right now, getting lots of draws over the last few games. And so I don't see Bologna really having too much of a chance here. I think Liverpool defensively has done a really good job, and I think Bologna is still looking for who's going to get some of those goals. So we're going to have I'm going to give maybe a 3-0 victory for Liverpool. I think they're going to take care of business at home and get a solid 3 points from this one. Next, we have a pretty strong matchup where Leipzig are hosting Juventus. Leipzig are doing decently well, kind of where you would expect them, sitting 3rd in the Bundesliga currently. They did well against, what was their first matchup? My apologies. Atletico Madrid. They did well against Atletico Madrid, but Madrid were able to get the win there. And then Juventus did well against PSV, a 3-1 victory. And Juventus are doing decent in their league too, sitting in 2nd at the moment. So this one's a tough one to predict. I do see that a lot of the Italian teams are able to work hard defensively, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of goals in this. I'm going to give it maybe a 1-1 draw between these two. I think they're going to cancel each other out, and it's going to result in a draw here. So 1-1 draw versus Leipzig and Juve. Next, we have Benfica hosting Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid seem to always do well in the Champions League. Currently doing reasonably well in La Liga, sitting in 4th position. and did well to get a win against Leipzig in their first matchup. Going away from home to Benfica might be an interesting story. Benfica are doing relatively well. They got a win against Red Star Belgrade in their first Champions League game. Now are hosting their first matchup and are doing decently well, third, but always fighting against Porto and Sporting in the Portuguese league. This is tough to determine. I would give the edge probably to Atletico here, but Benfica I think is a decent team at home. I am going to lean towards Atletico here, but it's going to be a close one. Maybe another 2-1 victory for Atletico in this one, giving them the 3 points. And our next matchup is Dinamo Zagreb hosting AS Monaco. And for Zagreb, they had a very tough first game, having to face Bayern Munich, and that 9-2 result doesn't really help with your confidence. They're also then not really at the top of their game in their leagues just yet. They're sitting in third. So we'll see what they can do hosting Monaco, where Monaco surprised most people by beating Barcelona in their first matchup, and actually have been doing very well. 6 wins and 1 draw in league puts them tied for top of Liga with PSG at the moment. And so I do give Monaco the edge here. I do see Zagreb probably getting a goal and probably not having a 9-2 loss either. But I think Monaco are looking really strong, and they could be pushing their way into the playoffs. If they can get another win on the board here, they could be comfortably in sooner rather than later. So I am going to give Monaco maybe a 4-1 victory against Zagreb. I know that's tough, Zagreb, but hopefully you can get points from other games in this league phase. But Monaco is getting the 3 points this round. Our next matchup we have is Lille hosting Real Madrid. Lille had a tough matchup where they lost to Sporting in their first matchup, and again are doing relatively okay in the in Liga, sitting in 5th. Although I think they'd want to be pushing higher than that. Real Madrid are doing well, sitting in 2nd so far. They did draw against Atletico Madrid, but that's always a tough matchup in seeing there. I think Real Madrid should have the advantage here. I think Lille has still some work to do to get into the form that they would want to be in. I am going to give them maybe 1 goal here, but it's going to be maybe a 3-1 victory for Real Madrid. They're going to keep rolling and get their second victory after beating Stuttgart 3-1 in the first matchup. So Real Madrid, another 3-1 victory for them in this one. Another intriguing matchup is Aston Villa hosting Bayern Munich. Aston Villa have been doing well in the Premier League so far, sitting in 5th at the moment, and showing that they're going to be a top team in the Premier League. Although recently they have dropped some points, tying Ipswich Town in the league. So there might be some kinks for them to figure out. Maybe it is a scenario where they're more focused on Bayern Munich than they were on a team like Ipswich, and maybe that's why they dropped points here. Because this would be a big game for Aston Villa to host a team of this magnitude. They haven't done that in a long time, and especially because they haven't been in Europe for that, in a while. Bayern Munich did very well against Dinamo Zagreb. They come into this game maybe with a different mentality. It's not going to be as easy as they had previously at home coming into Aston Villa. Although Bayern is looking sharp as they always do, only getting 1 draw against Bayer Leverkusen recently, but otherwise have been winning all their games previously. I do give Bayern Munich the edge here, although I think Aston Villa could do well to give them a real shot at this. I am going to give maybe a few more goals than we would expect. I'm going to go 3-2 and give Bayern Munich the victory here. Aston Villa, I think, are going to put up a reasonably good fight, get some good chances, and it could be a back-and-forth game, but I'm giving Bayern Munich the 3 points here. And finally, our last game here, we have Sturm Graz hosting Club Brugge in a matchup here. Sturm Graz are doing well in their league as they did last year. They're currently sitting in first place. The tough part is I'm struggling to see where they're going to get points. This could certainly be a matchup where they get points, especially at home against a team like Club Brugge that maybe isn't at the top of their game, especially in the Belgian Pro League. They had a tough matchup against Dortmund, Club Brugge did, in their first matchup, and now they go away to a team really trying to relish these opportunities and get some points on the board. This is going to be an interesting one. I think there could be lots of goals in this one. However, I do think this probably is kind of a balance between both teams, and I think it's going to end up being a draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw between these two teams. And that's it. Those are all of my predictions. You're welcome to make any predictions in the comments below. Please like and subscribe as I want to keep doing this, and I'm going to do my best to keep on top of all of the predictions, as I also do some Premier League predictions as well. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.